Hi, ardent fans and constructive critics. I presume you and your beloved ones are hale and healthy. It's activist come preacher, Professor S. Suresh, back with a sheer delight for my 71st video in process for publication on YouTube today, 28th of August 2020. The topic that I have selected for discussion today is communication skill. It's one of the most essential skills for career success as well as a life skill. Communication is from Latin communica, meaning to share, is the act of conveying meanings from one entity or group to another through the use of mutually understood signs, symbols and semiotic rules. Communication is a basic or fundamental soft skill as well as life skill, as I mentioned. The main steps inherent in to all communication are the formation of communicative motivation or reason, message composition, message encoding, transmission of the encoded messages as a sequence of signals from using a specific channel or medium, noise sources such as natural sources and in some cases human activity, reception of signals and reassembling of the encoded message, from a sequence of received signals, decoding of the reassembled encoded message, interpretation and making sense of the presumed original message. The scientific study of communication can be divided into information theory, which studies the quantification, storage and communication of information in general, communication studies that concerns human communication, biosemiotics, which examines communication in and between living organisms in general. The channel of communication can be visual, auditory, tactile, haptic, olfactory, electromagnetic or biochemical. Human communication is unique for its extensive use of abstract language. Development of civilization has been closely linked with progress in telecommunication. Non-verbal communication describes the processes of conveying a type of information in the form of non-linguistic representations. Examples of non-verbal communication include haptic communication, chronemic communication, gestures, body language, facial expressions, eye contact, etc. Non-verbal communication also relates to the extent to the intent of the message. Speech also contains non-verbal elements known as paralanguage, like rhythm, intonation, tempo, stress. It affects communication most at the subconscious level and establishes trust. Likewise, written texts include non-verbal elements such as handwriting style, the spatial arrangement of words and the use of emoticons to convey emotion. Non-verbal communication demonstrates one of Paul Václavic's laws. You cannot communicate. Once proximity has formed awareness, living creatures begin interpreting any signals received. Some of the functions of non-verbal communication in humans are to complement and illustrate, to reinforce and emphasize, to replace and substitute, to control and regulate, and to contradict the denotative stage. Non-verbal cues are heavily relied on to express communication and to interpret others' communication and can replace or substitute verbal messages. However, non-verbal communication is ambiguous. When verbal messages contradict non-verbal messages, observation of non-verbal behavior is relied on to judge another's attitudes and feelings rather than assuming the truth of the verbal message alone. There are several reasons as to why non-verbal communication plays a vital role in communication. Non-verbal communication is omnipresent. Omnipresent, present everywhere. They are included in every communication act. Total communication of non-verbal element channels such as the body, face, voice, appearance, touch, distance, timing and other environmental forces must be engaged during face-to-face interaction. Written communication can also have non-verbal attributes. Emails, web chats and the social media have options to change text form, colors, stationery, add emoticons, take capitalization and pictures in order to capture non-verbal cues into a verbal medium. Non-verbal behaviors are multifunctional. Many different non-verbal channels are engaged at the same time in communication acts and allows the chance for simultaneous messages to be sent and received. Non-verbal behaviors may form a universal language system. Smiling, crying, pointing, caressing and glaring are non-verbal behaviors. That are used and understood by people regardless of nationality. Such non-verbal signals are the most basic form of communication, and verbal communication is not effective due to language barriers. Verbal communication is a spoken or written conveyance of a language message. Human language can be defined as a system of symbols and the grammars by which the symbols are manipulated. The word language also refers to common properties of languages. Language learning normally occurs most intensely during human childhood. Most of the large numbers of human languages use patterns of sound or gestures for symbols which enable communication with others around them. Languages tend to share certain properties, although there are exceptions. There is no defined line between a language and a dialect. Constructed languages such as Esperanto, programming languages and various mathematical formalisms are not necessarily restricted to the properties shared by human language. As previously mentioned, language can be characterized as symbolic. The properties of language are governed by rules. Language follows prolonged rules, syntactic rules, semantic rules and pragmatic rules. The meanings that are attached to words can be literal or otherwise known as denotative. Relating to the topic being discussed or the meanings take context and relationships in the account, otherwise known as connotative. Relating to the feelings, history and power dynamics of communicators. Contrary to popular belief, sign languages of the world are considered to be verbal communication because the sign, vocabulary, grammar and other linguistic structure abide by all the necessary classifications as spoken languages. There are, however, non-verbal elements to sign languages such as speed, intensity and size of signs are made. The signer must sign yes in response to a question, or they may sign a sarcastic, large, slow yes to convey a different non-verbal meaning. The sign yes is the verbal message, while the other movements add non-verbal meaning to the message. Over time, the forms of and ideas about communication have evolved through the continuing progression of technology. Advances include communication psychology and media psychology. An emerging field of study. The progression of written communication can be divided into three information communication revolutions. The written communication first emerged through the use of pictographs. The pictograms were made in stone. Hence, written communication was not yet mobile. Pictograms began to develop standardized and simplified forms. The next step occurred when writing began to appear on paper, papyrus, clay, wax, and other media with commonly shared writing systems, leading to adaptable alphabets. Communication became mobile. The final stage is characterized by the transfer of information through controlled waves of electromagnetic radiation and other electronic signals. Communication is thus a process by which meaning is assigned and conveyed in an attempt to create shared understanding. Gregory Bateson called it the replication of tautologies in the universe. This process which requires a vast repertoire of skills in interpersonal processing, listening, observing, speaking, questioning, analyzing gestures, and evaluating, enables elaboration, collaboration, and cooperation. Business communication is used for a wide variety of activities, including but not limited to strategic communication planning, media relations, internal communications, public relations, brand management, reputation management, speech writing, customer-client relations, and internal employee communications. Companies with limited resources may choose to engage in only a few of these activities, while larger organizations may employ a full spectrum of communications. Since it is relatively difficult to develop such a broad range of skills, communication professionals often specialize in one or two of these areas, but usually have at least working knowledge of most of them. By far, the most important qualifications for communication professionals must possess are excellent writing ability, good people skills, and capacity to think critically and strategically. Business communication could also refer to the style of communication within a given corporate entity. Family communication is a study of communication perspective in a broadly defined family with intimacy and trusting relationship. The main goal of family communication is to understand the interactions of family and the pattern of behaviors of family members in different circumstances. Open and honest communication creates an atmosphere that allows family members to express their differences as well as love and admiration for one another. It also helps to understand the feelings for one another. In simple terms, interpersonal communication is a communication between one person and another. It is often referred to as face-to-face communication between two or more people. Both verbal or non-verbal communication or body language play a part of one person understands another. In verbal interpersonal communication, there are two types of messages being sent: a content message and a relational message. Content messages are messages about the topic at hand, and relational messages are messages about the relationship itself. This means that relational messages come across in how it says something, and it demonstrates a person's feeling, whether positive or negative, towards the individual that they are talking to, indicating not only how they feel about the topic at hand, but also how they feel about the relationship with the other individual. There are many different aspects of interpersonal communication, including audio-visual perception of communication problems. The concept follows the idea that the words change what form they take based on the stress level or urgency of the situation. It also explores the concept that stuttering during speech shows the audience that there is a problem or that the situation is more stressful. The attachment theory. This is the combined work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. This theory follows the relationship that builds between a mother and a child and the impact it has on the relationships with others. Emotional intelligence and triggers. Emotional intelligence focuses on the ability to monitor one's own emotions as well as those of others. Emotional triggers focus on events or people that tend to set off intense emotional reactions within individuals. Attribution theory. This is a study of how individuals explain what causes different events and behaviors. The power of words. Verbal communication focuses heavily on the power of words and how those words are said. It takes into consideration tone, volume, and choice of words. Non-verbal communication. It focuses heavily on the setting that the words are conveyed in, as well as the physical tone of the words. Ethics in personal relations. It is about a space of mutual responsibility between two individuals. It's about giving and receiving in a relationship. Deception in communication. This concept goes into everyone lies and how this can impact relationships. This theory is explored by James Hearn in his article Interpersonal Deceptions Theory. 10 Lessons for Negotiators, Conflict in Couples. This focus focuses on the impact that social media has on relationships as well as how to communicate through conflicts. Communication skills are vital to healthy, efficient workplace, often categorized as soft skills or interpersonal skill. Communication is the act of sharing information from one person to another person or group of people. There are many different ways to communicate, each of which plays an important role in sharing information. There are 4 main types of communication we use on a daily basis: verbal, non-verbal, written and visual. We already discussed about all these things. Okay, some tips to improve verbal communication skills. Use a strong, confident speaking voice, especially when presenting information to a few or a group of people. Be sure to use a strong voice so that everyone can safely hear you. Be confident when speaking so that your ideas are clear and easy for others to understand. Use active listening. The other side of using verbal communication is intently listening to and hearing others. Active listening skills are key when conducting a meeting, presentation, or even when participating in a one-on-one conversation. Doing so will help you grow as a good communicator. Avoid filler words. It can be tempting, especially during a presentation, to use filler words such as like, so, yeah. While it may feel natural after completing a sentence or pausing to collect your thoughts, it can also be distracting for your audience. Try presenting to a trusted friend, rehearsal, or colleague who can call attention to the times you use filler words. Try to replace them by taking a breath when you are tempted to use these. Non-verbal communication, we already discussed about all those things. Tips to improve your non-verbal communication skills. Notice how your emotions feel physically throughout the day as you experience a range of emotions. Try to identify where you feel that emotion within your body. For example, if you are feeling anxious, you might notice that your stomach feels tight. Developing self-awareness around how your emotions affect your body can give you the greater mastery over the external presentation. Be intentional about your non-verbal communication. Make an effort to display positive body language when you feel alert, open and positive about your surroundings. You can also use body language to support your verbal communication. If you feel confused or anxious about information, like using a furrowed brow, use body language alongside verbal communication, such as asking follow-up questions or pulling the presenter aside to give feedback. Mimic non-verbal communications you find effective. If you find certain facial expressions or body language beneficial to a certain setting, use it as a guide when improving your own non-verbal communications. For example, if you see that someone nods their head, it communicates approval and positive feedback efficiently. Use it in the next meeting when you have to convey the same feeling. Written communication, written communication. Tips to improve your written communication skills. Strive for simplicity. Written communication should be simple and clear as possible. While it may be helpful to design, include lots of detail in instructional communications. For example, you should look for areas where you can write as clearly as possible for your audience to understand. Don't rely on tone because you do not have the nuance of verbal and non-verbal communication. Be careful when you are trying to communicate a certain tone when writing. For example, attempting to communicate a joke, sarcasm or excitement might be translated differently depending on the audience. Instead, try to keep your writing as simple and plain as possible and follow up with a verbal communication where you can add more personality. Take time to review a written communication. Setting time aside to reread your emails, letters or memos can help you identify mistakes or opportunities to say something differently. For important communication or those that will be sent to a large number of people, it might be helpful to have a trusted colleague review it as well. Keep a file of writing you find effective or enjoyable. If you receive a certain pamphlet, email or memo that you find particularly helpful or interesting, save it for reference when writing your own communication. Incorporating methods or styles you like can help you to improve your time. Visual communication. Tips to improve your visual communication skills. Ask others before including visuals. If you are considering sharing a visual aid in your presentation or email, consider asking others for feedback. Adding visuals can sometimes make concepts confusing or muddy. Gathering a third-party perspective can help you decide whether the visual adds value to your communication. Consider your audience. Be sure to include visuals that are easily understood by your audience. For example, if you are displaying a chart with unfamiliar data, be sure to take time and explain what is happening in the visual and how it relates to what you are seeing. You should never use sensitive, offensive, violent, or graphic visuals in uniform. To make improvements to your communication skill set, personal goals to work through the things you want to accomplish step by step. It might be helpful to consult with the trusted colleagues, managers, or mentors to identify which areas would be best to focus on first. Barriers to effective communication can retard or distort the message or intention of the message being conveyed. This may result in failure of the communication process or cause an effect that is undesirable. These include filtering, selective perception, information overload, emotions, language, silence, communication apprehension, gender differences, and political correctness. This also includes a lack of expressing knowledge appropriate communication, which occurs when a person uses ambiguous or complex legal words, medical jargon, or descriptions of the situation or the environment that is not understood by the recipient. Make it simple for the recipients to understand. Physical barriers are often due to the nature of the environment. Example is a natural barrier which exists when workers are located in different buildings or at different sites. Likewise, poor or outdated equipment, particularly the failure of management to introduce new technology, may also cause problems. Staff shortages are another factor which frequently causes communication difficulties for an organization. System design refers to problems with the structures or systems in place in an organization. There are attitudinal barriers. These are a result of problems with the staff in an organization. These may be brought about by, for example, by such factors as poor management, lack of consultation with the employees, personality conflicts, and which can result in people delaying or refusing to communicate the personal attitudes of individual employees, which may be due to lack of motivation or dissatisfaction at work, brought about by insufficient training to enable them to carry out particular tasks, or simply resistance to change due to enhanced attitudes and ideas. Ambiguity of words, phrases, words sounding the same but having different meaning can convey a different meaning altogether. Hence, a communicator must ensure that the receiver receives the same meaning. It is better if such words are avoided by using alternates whenever possible. Individual linguistic ability, the use of jargon, difficult or inappropriate words in communication can prevent the recipients from understanding the message. Poorly explained or misunderstood messages can also result in confusion. However, research in communication has shown that confusion can lend legitimacy to research when persuasion fails. Physiological barriers. These may result from individuals' personal discomfort caused, for example, by ill health, poor eyesight, or hearing difficulties. Bypassing. This happens when the communicators do not attach the same symbolic meanings to the words. It is when the sender is expressing a thought or a word, but the receiver gives it a different meaning. For example, ASAP, restroom. Technological multitasking and absorbency. With the rapid increase in technologically driven communication in the past several decades, individuals are increasingly faced with condensed communication in the form of email, text, and social updates. There is a particular lingo that people use. This has in fact led to a notable change in the way younger generations communicate and perceive their own self-efficacy to communicate and connect with others. With the ever-constant pressure of another world in one's pocket, individuals are multitasking both physically and cognitively as constant reminders of something else happening somewhere else bombard them. Though perhaps too new and advancement to see yet long-term effects. This is the notion currently explored by Sherry Turkle. Fear of being criticized. This is a major factor that prevents good communication. If we exercise simple practices to improve our communication skill, we can become effective communicators. Gender barriers. Most communicators, whether aware or not, often have a set agenda. This is very notable among the different genders. Cultural differences exist within countries, between religious groups, and in organizations or at an organization level where companies, teams, and units may have different expectations, norms, and ideologies. Families and family groups may also experience the effect of cultural barriers to communication within and between different family members or groups. Communication to a great extent is influenced by culture and cultural variables. Understanding cultural aspects of communication refers to having knowledge of different cultures in order to communicate effectively with cross-cultural people. Cultural aspects of communication are of great relevance in today's world, which is now a global village thanks to globalization. Cultural aspects of communication are the cultural differences which influence communication across borders. Verbal communication, non-verbal, these things we have discussed. Non-verbal communication takes the following forms: paralinguistics, the elements other than language where the voice is involved in communication includes tone, speech, verbal cues, vocal cues, etc. Proxemics deals with the concept of the space element in communication. Artifactics studies the non-verbal signals or communication which emerges from personal accessories such as dress or fashion accessories worn, and it varies with culture as people of different countries follow different dress codes. Chronomics deals with the time aspects of communication and also includes the importance given on time. This aspect of communication is also influenced by cultural differences, as it is well known that there is great difference in the value given by different cultures to time. Kinesics mainly deals with the body languages such as postures, gestures, head nods, leg movements, etc. In different countries, the same gestures and postures are used to convey different meanings. Sometimes even a particular kinetic indicating something good in a country may have a negative meaning in some culture. So in order to have an effective communication across the world, it is desirable to have knowledge of cultural variables affecting communication. Western conversational interaction is typically dyadic between two particular people, where eye contact is important and the speaker controls the interaction and contained in a relatively short defined time frame. However, traditional aboriginal conversational interaction is communal, broadcast to so many people. High contact is not important. The listener controls the interaction and continuous, spread over a long and indefinite time frame. Every information exchange between living organisms, that is transmission of signals that involve a living sender and receiver, can be considered a form of communication. And even primitive creatures such as corals are competent to communicate. Non-human communications also include cell signaling, cellular communication, and chemical transmissions between primitive organisms like bacteria and within the plant and fungal kingdoms. Communication is not a tool used only by humans, plants, and animals, but is also used by microorganisms like bacteria. This process is called quorum sensing. Through quorum sensing, bacteria can sense the density of cells and regulate gene expression accordingly. This can be seen in both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. The first major model of communication was introduced by Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver for Bell Laboratories in 1949. The original model was designed to mirror the functioning of radio and telephone technologies. The initial model consisted of three primary parts: sender, channel, and receiver. The sender was a part of a telephone a person spoke into, the channel was a telephone itself, and the receiver was a part of the phone where one could hear the other person. Shannon and Weaver also recognized that often there is a static that interferes with one listening to a telephone conversation, which may be deemed noise. Noise is unwanted thing. Communication can be seen as process of information transmission with the three levels of semiotic roles: pragmatic, semantic, syntactic. Therefore, communication is social interaction where at least two interacting elements share a common set of signs and a common set of semiotic rules. This commonly held rule in some sense ignores auto-communication, including the interpersonal communication via diaries or self-talk, both secondary phenomena that follow the primary acquisition of communicative. Theories of co-regulation describe communication as a creative and dynamic continuous process rather than a discrete exchange of information. In any communication model, noise is interference with the decoding of messages sent over the channel by an encoder. There are many examples of noise. Environmental noise, like standing next to loudspeakers at a party, noise from a construction site next to a classroom. Okay, physiological impairment noise, physical maladies that prevent effective communication such as deafness, blindness, etc. Semantic noise, different interpretations of the meaning of certain words. Syntactical noise, mistakes in grammar can disrupt communication, such as abrupt changes in verb tense during a sentence. Organizational noise, poorly structured communication can prevent the receiver from accurate interpretation. Psychological noise, certain attitudes can also make communication difficult. For instance, great anger or sadness may cause someone to lose focus on the present moment. Disorders such as autism may also severely hamper effective communication. To face communication noise, redundancy and acknowledgement must often be used. Acknowledgements are messages from the addressee informing the originator that his or her communication has been received and is understood. Message repetition and feedback about message received are necessary in the process of noise to reduce the probability of misunderstanding. The act of disambiguation results regards the attempt of reducing noise and wrong interpretations when the semantic value or meaning of a sign can be subject to noise or in presence of multiple meanings, which makes the sense making difficult. Disambiguation attempts to decrease the likelihood of misunderstanding. This is also a fundamental skill in communication process activated by counselors, psychotherapists, interpreters, and in coaching sessions based on colloquium. In information technology, the disambiguation process and the automatic disambiguation of meanings of words and sentences has also been an interest and concern since the earliest days of computer transmitted of knowledge. Now, communication is a natural skill even for animals, birds, marine species, and insects. Nobody ever taught them how to communicate. Human beings are the only creature that needs to be taught everything, starting from scratch. Does it mean that human beings do not have these qualities or traits that should be inborn? Workshops, also known as training programs, are conducted for anything and everything, including communication, and some people mint money through these programs. Nothing is impossible, it's all in the mind. If you are determined, we can even touch the sky. Never use the lame excuse that I can't do it. Debates, discussion on topics like this can go on forever. Anyway, let me call it a day. We'll meet again real soon. Some of the statements, views expressed are mine based on my experience, limited knowledge gained over 6 decades. Always watch these videos with a closed caption for absolute 100% comprehension as per my sincere recommendations zillion times so far. I know I must through to complete the presentation within 20 minutes max. It's a time limit I have set myself to retain the viewer's attention as enough. I know nowadays I exceed this time limit since I make honest attempts to cover the selected topic more elaborately, including so many intricate details, referring wide variety of sources, in particular Wikipedia quite extensively, besides articles and books published recently. Besides, of course, I add my own salt and pepper and masala based on my personal experiences so far in my life and also intuition. Stay at home as much as possible to maintain social distancing attributed to pandemic novel COVID-19 and prolong your lifespan. Lead a healthy life. God alone can put a stop to natural and unnatural events when we buy war, cyber war events like pandemics that may lead which may lead to apocalypse and extinction of all sentient species of Earth for no fault of theirs. All the best. Rest in peace and harmony.